if there's 1,000 steps between you and God, get emotional here, he will take 999 to come your way. All you simply need to do is take that one step. He'll take care of the rest.
All right. Welcome to the True Man Podcast with Mike Van Pelt. This is an invitation to radical reconstruction of a man's masculine heart and soul, and a place of safe community where we dare to ask questions deep-seated inside a man and explore ways to help you become a better man, a better dad, and a better spouse. Well, I am glad you're here for this very special edition of the True Man Podcast. There is no getting around it today. And why would I want to? This is an episode I've been looking at and thinking about for a while. It's number 100. So who other than to have on the podcast than the gentleman that helped me start it all, Mr. Paul Baily, and I'll bring him on in just a second. But before I get into the podcast, I just want to mention my new upcoming book that's coming out. Before we even jump into the podcast, here's something that's changed, Paul. My new book, True Man, True Ways, a roadmap of discovery to the masculine heart. You can find more out about that book and purchase it at MikeVanPeltAuthor.com. That's MikeVanPeltAuthor.com. And of course, I will put that in the show notes. Now, here's a quick intro for those that are new to the podcast that may not know Paul. So Paul Baily and I launched the True Man Podcast almost 2 years ago. And it was basically a spin out of our men's small group. So, we had this men's small group in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and we just thought, well, what the heck? Let's do a podcast. So Paul is the president and founder of Palmetto Private Wealth Advisors in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And he's been a great friend and always provides me wise counsel. Paul, can you believe it? Episode number 100.
Congratulations on that. That's a big deal, and I know you've been on quite the journey. Not only podcast connections, but now the book. It's pretty big. So, right on. Good on you.
Well, it all started, for those that are watching the video, right there in Paul's office. Really, we had this idea to start a men's small group a number of years ago, and the podcast showed up. And what's interesting about today's podcast, I was asking a lot of people. I said, what? I got 100 coming up. Like, what should I do? And everybody had all these ideas. And what's interesting about that was, in the end, I thought, I called you and I said, well, we got to record this. And, I think I just want to circle back to why we started this. And you said, yeah, but we also need to talk about what's changed. And that really hit me, because in the book, I'm writing a chapter on goals. Why? Not because we need another book on SMART goals, but the bottom line is a lot of men need to start with the basics. But how I approach SMART goals is, don't forget about the journey that goes along with those goals that you set, and what it takes, to make those goals happen. And so, we'll talk a little bit today about the journey. What's changed? So Paul, what's changed for you over the last couple of years?
Sure. So if we were to back it up, how long have we've been doing this podcast? Has it been two?
Well, it started a couple of years ago. Okay. And can I share the funny story how we even?
Yeah, go for it.
So the podcast was an idea, and I wasn't quite the man of action then that I was now. I'm just going to say that. And so I called some people that knew something about podcast equipment. I ordered the equipment. It showed up at my house. And I thought, now I have to take action on this, right? And so Paul and I finally get around to recording, and we did it on a Sunday, just like we're recording this on a Sunday, just like we're doing now. Only difference is it took a couple of adult beverages to actually get us to hit the record button, and we did it. We popped it off, and we kept it going for a while, and then I went to a more of an interview style. But here we are, 100 later, and boom, here you are. So yeah, it's been about 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. Yeah, yeah. A lot can happen in 2 years. A lot can happen in, quite frankly, in a month. Truly, right. I think I would probably back it up just a little bit further than that. I went
in trouble.
I went independent as a financial advisor from a larger corporate broker about 6 years ago. But about a year into that, I had my own building at that point, and we were getting settled. And I thought, hey, this would be a good idea. Maybe we could have a group of guys meet here, talk about life. We didn't need necessarily another Bible study, though we do love the Bible.
Yep.
We didn't need another accountability group because, everybody can probably behave a little better, but we do appreciate action and stuff that's in line with good principles.
Yep.
We really didn't need a soft version of AA where you cry on your brother's shoulder and talk about your inadequacies. But it's good to be transparent.
Yeah.
We needed a place where we could engage with something new, something fresh that started with being authentic. And I had to make a decision way back then. Holy crap, I'm going to actually ask a couple of clients to be a part of this. And what if they find out that I don't have my stuff together as much as I might be perceived, or closer to the truth, how I might present myself? What then? Could I afford that sort of vulnerability?
Yeah.
I remember the whole idea behind vulnerability is if you let down your guard, you can get arrowed. You can take the spear, you can take the knife. So I had to make a very conscious decision. Yep, it's worth it. And since then, it's been a slow but sure march with lots of encouragement from mentors and good thinkers and men of faith and elders that have said, it's worth it. And I just decided, okay, I didn't get there all in one moment, but now I'm betting it all on the kingdom. I'm all in. I'm pushing all the chips to the center of the table. And so I think maybe to set the background, it's been a slow move, and thank God for his patience with me, and undeniable invitation. It's been a slow move toward let's talk about and engage on the things that really matter. Yeah, take a risk with men. Take a risk with clients in your conversations. So all that to say, it made sense at that point to invite other guys. I mean, this was your crazy idea.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, let's put it on the airwaves. And man, maybe somebody's got too much time on their hands. Maybe they'll actually dial in.
Yeah, I wish I could even put my finger on what I was thinking. I had somebody just innocently ask me outside of our circle, hey, is this anything you've considered? And I basically said, well, it's kind of a joke in our little small group that we should have recorded a podcast. Maybe that would have been interesting. And so it really started as, somebody bringing it up that I didn't expect to hear from. And, what I've come to understand and realize is that God speaks to us in a wide variety of ways. And for whatever the reason, when this person said, have you ever thought about doing that? It became a very serious, thing that I wanted to discover. And I thought, well, heck, this sounds like a pretty decent idea. And wasn't anything that I knew anything about. I didn't even listen to a lot of podcasts. In fact, the only one I can think of that I was listening to at the time may have been John Eldridge's podcast, quite honestly.
Right.
And then, it morphed into me listening to a number of different podcasts, and I became convinced that this was a good way to move in, because what I realized was, or what I knew was that, men, we're a challenging species, really, right? I mean, we won't take action on our pain points sometimes until we're completely broken or we're motivated to take action on it. And my hope was that we could start a podcast that would impact men to take action, or to hear from other men or women. I have women on the podcast all the time that would hear those stories, and it would motivate them to take action on whatever was going on in their life. And that's really was the premise behind starting this whole thing. And boy,
that's good, Mike. I think you're right on there. As people, we are drawn to story.
Yes.
And so when we were doing our small group, when you were here in the Spartanburg area, we would oftentimes use clips from movies. We would watch a video series and have response. We would grab a book and read passages out of there. One of our guys was a brilliant teacher. He brought us through one of the Gospels, and he told stories. And it makes a lot of sense for you to be talking with people about their stories, because we can so quickly then and easily, and it really is the back door sometimes, into informing other people of the opportunities that they have to write their story on God's canvas and explore what he might have to do with them, for them, and create their own unique signature on this long continuum of what we call history. So that makes a lot of sense as to why it's moved in the direction that it's moved. And I'm just pleased that not only did you take the risk, see the opportunity, develop your skills, work toward those goals, but 100 episodes later, I kind of get the idea that you're probably more excited moving forward than you were maybe at 50 or even 75. Is that fair?
Yeah. It took me a while, right? And I've told people, initially I was a little concerned because I'm a quality freak. I like, and maybe, that it was that perfectionist in me. And I actually hired a podcast coach, and, we went through a great process. And quite honestly, I asked him for two things. I said, can you help me figure out how to talk on a microphone? Ask good questions and be a good storyteller. And we worked through that process for a little while. And the beauty of where I was at in life was this natural curiosity to have these one-on-one discussions with people and meet people and to hear their stories. And I haven't lost that, and was probably, I don't know, Paul, maybe about 50 episodes in or so. And I actually had this epiphany not necessarily through me, but people talking to me and telling me about their experience on the podcast, where I went, oh my gosh, this thing has legs and you're pretty good at it. And God gave me a gift at that point, and that was confidence. And I didn't realize that somewhere on my, journey over the years, primarily through some of the professional experiences that I'd had or not had a good experience with, I had lost some confidence in my own ability, sadly enough. And what I realized was, by doing this podcast, amazingly enough, is that I got my confidence back because I was taking steps every day to do something in my business to improve it. And the podcast became kind of the centerpiece of my universe, and relationships began to come out of it, and partnerships began to come out of it, and other business relationships, began to come out of it. And I got to tell you, I'm a little blown away. And to your point, I'm more excited about the next 100 because I have a really good feel for what I'm doing now. And so I love it. I love this format and trying to, get the word out on, really, men. You can be better men. You can be better dads. You can be better husbands, and you don't have to be alone in that journey. That isolation of feeling like you're alone is a terrible way to live. Terrible way to live. And I think one of the reasons why we started this, Paul, was that we wanted guys to know, hey, you're not alone. We all have our stuff that we bring to the table.
The cool thing about engaging like this, whether it's being a part of a men's group or a format similar to that, or launching a podcast or writing a book, is the experience changes you.
Oh.
The author that is writing the novel, it's more than just them putting words down on a page. It changes them. And when the author who's creating the story is impacted by the story itself, that's magical. And oftentimes it catches us off guard. You've heard people talk about this all the time. I thought I'd help out a friend, but after we were done, I realized this had changed me. This thing that I had moved toward, that I was feeling either ultra confident that I was going to be helpful, or completely unqualified for, whatever, it changed me and it caught me off guard. And the engagement actually was the material that affected change in the storyteller or the small group leader.
Yeah.
And so I think we really do ourselves a favor when we step into mystery and reach out and drop the guard and take the risk. And so it was, so I'll pivot a little bit here, because I was sitting in a group of guys up in Charlotte, North Carolina last Tuesday night, and we were engaging on one question that I found particularly interesting, and that is, what areas of life are you currently taking a risk in? And, your average guy is all about mitigate the risk, reduce the risk.
Right.
For Pete's sake, put the sharp instrument back in the drawer. Somebody's going to get hurt.
Right.
But, to that other side, gosh, it's so cool when you look at a real super sharp sword, or pull out the pocket knife that is, can slice paper with just pulling and using gravity. I mean, there is something very cool about the other side of risk. And so your question was, so what's changed? And for me, I feel really blessed based on some things that have happened in my life and the gifts that I've been given. We last 2 years have been the effects of COVID, shall we say? I think COVID was a full blown crisis at a couple of years ago, maybe a little bit longer now.
Yeah.
But if you recall, I think that I had gotten a hold of the message that it was worth it to take risks and to write the story, so to speak, with what God was calling me to. So in 2 years, well, I bought 15 acres of mountain land, renovated a moonshine cabin, raised 50 broiler chickens that we slaughtered for the freezer. I raised a goat herd and sold goats off.
We did an episode on goats and chickens, people.
Yeah. The point is, for somehow I have enjoyed the fact, and it's kind of seeped, I suppose, into my spiritual DNA, that really I can't fail. You can't really fail. There's always a lesson. There's always gold, even when things don't work out like you'd like to.
Yeah.
So my favorite question is, what would you attempt if you knew that you could not fail?
Yeah.
And it's usually a stunning delivery as far as how it hits the listener, because they got to take a minute.
Yeah. I actually have that it's a paperweight. It's sitting on my desk about 5 feet from here. It's on my desk, that saying. And it's so interesting, Paul, that you would bring that up in the way that you did, because doing the podcast to some degree was a risk. Going into business was a risk. Saying that I was going to exclusively work with men was a risk. And just a couple of weeks ago, I had a guy that I was talking to, and he said to me, one of these consultants, gosh, Mike, it's really hard to do what you're doing. Oh, well, thanks. Now, goodbye. Because I don't run around with people that tell me how hard things are. I already know that. It's kind of like somebody firing a preacher telling you you're a sinner. I already know that. What I need around me, and what I have figured out, and what I put around me, are people that will help me fight, go to war with me, and help me achieve my goal. Because the goals moved a little bit, and so I commonly tell people, what's the goal now? I want to impact the lives of 1 million men. Now, it's going to take a lot of people to help me do that. So I need good people around me. And, that's what I'm attempting to do, because I know when I affect the lives of 1 million men, I affect their families. I affect their children's children, right? Because we affect the world around us in a better way, rather than listening to all the shizzle. See how I did that, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
All the shizzle going on around us.
A lot of shizzle going on.
And so it's what have I learned to do? And I'm really, really proud of this. One thing I've learned to do really, really well over the last 2 or 3 years, I just turn off the news. I don't even need to listen to it, because quite honestly, what's going on around us is pretty predictable.
That's right. I appreciate you bringing that up. And it occurs to me that there might be some folks that are listening to us that are on the front end of coming to some understandings.
Right.
getting a little clarity, maybe for the first time, maybe starting to question some of those old recorded messages, starting to wonder if there might be more. And I think we both have years now in the saddle of challenging the norm and those messages. But for those folks that are, in fact, starting, they're probably a little scared, maybe a little intimidated, certainly overwhelmed.
Yeah.
If I let go of this, what do I have to grab onto? And I suppose my strong encouragement would simply be, it's always easy to run toward something bigger, better, greater than it is to run away from things. And so what decision could you make today, just today, that's it, that could put you in a better place, listening to better voices, more truth, that would allow tomorrow to look a little brighter, a little more hopeful, so that tomorrow you get to make another small decision about what you're going to do and surround yourself with. And day after day, just like stacking bricks on a wall, you find yourself looking back and thinking, holy cow, I just built a massive wall brick by brick of little choices that led me to a whole lot more hopeful place than I had a year ago.
Yeah. I couldn't, I don't know that I could say any better than that, because it really is building a foundation. I do believe the Bible talks about this, right? Don't build your house on sand, right?
That's right.
And so it really is a lot about building the correct foundation in whether it's your life or your business or whatever the case may be. And that is one thing that I've fought for. And when I say fought, I literally mean fought for over the last couple of years. Really, when I started this whole journey out, and we really, to some degree, were forced to move to Atlanta. I mean that in a good way, but I mean, we just, we were kind of fine where we were at, really for the most part. But when disruption occurs, you got to shift. And my mind mentally, I just went to, you have to find a way to make this happen. Have to find a way to make this happen, but it's only going to work if you trust in Christ. And I mean, I really went to bat for that. And amazingly enough, not that I should be surprised, he showed up. He showed up. And, do I have my bad days as an entrepreneur? Absolutely. We all do. But I have more good days than I have bad days, because so many of my days are centered around a similar discussion that you and I are having right now, or I'm helping somebody work through something through the power of Christ, not me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. And I'll pivot here, because you're referencing just here a half second ago, your decision and determination that the business would continue and you would continue to press forward and improve and grow. But I think that's also translatable to the way we father our children, and the way we are engaging in our relationships, in our marriages. And so right now, I have a soon-to-graduate senior son at high school, and right behind him, beautiful 17-year-old daughter. And there are good days and there's not so good days as far as my ability and willingness to engage. And yet I recognize, it's not all up to me. The only hope that I really have, and the only hope they have, is that there's going to be something sure and foundational to carry us all through. some pretty turbulent times in our society. And as we
Oh,
think
man.
about our children, launching them out into a very chaotic world, I am reminded, and I promise this is true, the Spirit prompts me to engage with them in opportunities that they might just be a snatch of time, but that little moment's going to come and it's going to go, and I'm either going to grab it and marshal it for good, or I'm going to let it pass because I choose to be passive, and I want to be safe. And
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity now for us to your point, choose Christ, his ability, and recognize that the evil one would love to see our businesses, our families, our marriages destroyed, or at least become lukewarm or quasi, as opposed to really chasing the light and pushing back the darkness. So we were talking before we hopped on the podcast, our kids, once they leave the nest, it's the closing of one season, opens another, but there's those opportunities that will never be afforded again in that manner. And so, yeah, our only hope is the truth.
Yeah. Wow. Paul, you just bring in the bombs today. Well, I guess we need to go back to having you on every week. Yeah, both of us going through that transition with our kids. And, like I was saying to you before we started recording, I kind of laugh about this because, my daughter's going to graduate this year, and it's like, okay, well, I got two kids that are going to have graduated from high school and moved on to college. And I think, well, I'm moving on to a new season, but it really feels constant. Like I'm always moving on to a new season, which is interesting. And so, but what I've gotten out of that is, regardless of what season I find myself in, that I'm much, and this is what I talk with a lot of guys about. I'm much more comfortable with that than I was, because I find that when I keep God centered in the middle of it, I know it's survivable, if you will, that I can get through it, to your point, that I'm not going to fail, that even if something, maybe that doesn't go the way I wanted, there's something there that I can take from it. And so that's the important piece, is that I'm a lot like you. So it's interesting that you brought that up. I hadn't really thought about it in that way. I mean, I don't feel like I can fail right now. Now, there are times when I need to be lifted up, and that's where the benefit of having good people around you comes into play, because if they know you well, they'll see that.
That's right. And my reminder there would be, if you feel isolated, if you feel, as you look around, you're not sure who you could count on to tell you the truth because they really care about you, you better change that.
Quickly. Yeah.
God is faithful to bring people around and to encourage you in the path that he has for you. So he is not an uncaring, distant father. I heard it said just earlier today, if there's 1,000 steps between you and God, get emotional here, he will take 999 to come your way. All you simply need to do is take that one step. He'll take care of the rest.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think I didn't know this for a long time, Paul. I thought if I took 1,000 steps, he might, if I was lucky, meet me halfway.
Right.
And I think a lot of people feel that way, unfortunately.
Well, a lot of recovering Lutherans would probably say that.
Oh yeah, I got called out again. Yeah. Well, it's interesting to really come alive in your faith. And when you get out of your head and into your heart, which is what I talk about quite a bit, I mean, you can accomplish so much more. And the other thing too, and I just finished working on this for a chapter in an upcoming collaborative book that I'm a part of. Yes, a new announcement coming soon. And that is the power of asking for help. And this is where I failed probably really early on in my life. And these things sometimes become habits, bad habits, right? And so you think you can just get through life on your own, not dependent on God, not dependent on the people around you that care about you. And so you don't ask for help. You don't reach out. You fly solo, and it can end in disaster or a pretty good plane wreck.
Yeah,
if you
that's
don't
right.
self-correct.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the things that, I've been doing a lot of exploring on personally, is this idea of asking for help, because I can sit here and I can go, well, I could talk about the challenges men have. They, not having identity, not having purpose, not having, vision, not having this, that, or the other thing. But the reality is, and all those things would be true and more for all of us at some point in our life. But I think the challenge is that so much of the time is that we don't ask for help. And that would include going to God in prayer. That is an aspect of asking for help, along with asking for help with good people around you. And if I have to say, one of the things that I'm discovering more and more all the time is this idea of how important it is to have a little humility and ask for help.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And the response is oftentimes so incredibly generous.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Where else in our culture and our society are actually you finding folks actually asking for help? It reveals a lack. It reveals a vulnerability. It may be a deficit. But you'll find that people are relieved to hear somebody say, I recognize I'm not where I want to be, where I need to be. Would you help me? Now, I don't want them to do the lifting for me.
Right.
But I want them to engage to the degree that we're both made better and stronger on account of that engagement. And I suppose, to your point earlier, it really underlines the whole idea that most of us feel like we need to qualify ourselves before we actually show up for life. Right?
Yeah.
And so we oftentimes try to do that with God. I'll try to act a little better, and well, then I can go to church, or then I can go to confession, or then I can qualify to somehow lead a group. But one of the things that Brennan Manning has said that I really appreciate in the Ragamuffin Gospel is God loves us as we are, not as we should be. And if you get that as a deeply loved son, just like I love my son, yes, I'm disappointed with some of his choices from time to time. He's 18, for Pete's sake.
Yeah, right.
But it doesn't change my devotion and my goodwill toward him. And so he doesn't have to pose. He doesn't have to fake it. He doesn't have to qualify himself. I love him just the way he is. And I'll let God take care of the journey that he has for Benjamin.
Yeah, that's so good. You know, I was hearing you say that, and I remember, particularly when I was young, but you know, it could have gone on into my 30s. I don't even know at this point. That old saying of, you know, fake it till you make it. And I think to myself, what a crock.
You mean the conventional wisdom
What a
doesn't actually hold
crock.
true? Yeah.
Who came up with that? You
Right.
know, because if you buy into that, and I did, I spent a good portion of my life buying into I'll fake it till I make it. Well, man, you might get lucky, but most of us don't escape that.
And what world have you built? What have you
Yeah.
built? It's all built on the fallacy that you are something that you wanted to be, as opposed to just grinding it out with you and God, you and a few close brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love reflecting on some of those past sayings. There was one that I grew up with, and it just seems like, and I used to repeat it to myself all the time. If it is to be, it's up to me. Wow, that's some pretty good pressure to put on yourself. No, not so much. You know, I definitely see that. There's there's really no aspect of God in that statement, I don't think.
Hmm. Just enough kernel of truth that we do, uh, we do need to engage in that part of the story that is uniquely ours, and the responsibility to step up. But no, it's not all up to me. If it is, the pressure builds. And if you fail, what does that say about you?
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, you know, life for a lot of guys, and again, this is probably why we started this whole thing. It's a pressure cooker, man. And for a lot of guys that aren't oriented or grounded in God, or have a group of guys around them to keep them grounded, man, it's like a pressure cooker all the time. And that thing could blow at any point. And, you know, I know, Paul, you've seen this, you know, maybe you've experienced it. I mean, we've seen guys, it's a matter of time before that pressure cooker just gets too hot.
Hmm.
And boils over. And then, you know, what's your plan of attack? You know, I think when we first started this, you know, I remember that we'd always have that little statement of like, well, if your wife kicks you out at 3:00 in the morning, who are you going to call?
Yeah.
Do you have somebody to call? You got someplace to go? You got a flat tire on the side of the road, 1:00 in the morning. Probably not a good time to be out, by the way. But if it happens, who are you calling for help?
Right. Who's your wingman?
Yeah. And so, you know, to me, that was this premise that really started this whole idea of our True Man small group, and now, you know, we brought it on to the podcast, and you know, the biggest thing I've seen, Paul, and not just through us and the small group we started, but some of the groups that we've been around, is that, man, when you can get around these other men and really have intentional, deep discussions, and you could be around a campfire, you could be blowing up Christmas trees like we were in January, or you could be, you know, on a gun range, or wherever the case may be. Man, life just seems so much better when you have those intentional discussions and you're around groups of guys that just, want a life of more and freedom in their life like you want.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's probably a great time to kind of summarize. I think we've both found, and everything that we've talked about here in this last 35, 45 minutes is centered around the design is community.
Yes.
That is the intention. That's how we're created. And if you're living isolated, doing it on your own, living shallow without connection points, you're going to have problems. You just can't make life work outside of how you've been designed. You can acknowledge it or you can ignore it. But either way, there will be fallout, either good consequences or bad. And you'll look back at life and ask yourself, what could I have done different? Or I'm so glad I did life with those guys, those people, because the stories we have now are gold, and the journey that we traveled, I did it in company and with the benefit of people that loved me.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, to me, that's a great spot to end. And, there are so many people that I could thank for this podcast. All the guests that have been on, I have people all the time. They're like, Mike, what's your favorite episode? And, I don't necessarily have a favorite episode. They're like having children. They all have their own personality and they're all great in their own way. And I think they contribute to what is a curated library that men can go to and find something, that they need. We've done so many different episodes and I'm so thankful for all the guests that have been on. I'm so thankful for all the guests that continue to contact me. It's amazing. And I'm so thankful for you, Paul, that we partnered with it to start this thing. And I would have never guessed in a million years that some of this stuff would have gone the way that it's gone, but it's amazing. And so I appreciate you being there, at the beginning of the journey. Means
my
a lot.
Privilege. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been fun. It's been good.
All right, we're gonna wrap up this episode. Paul, how can folks get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you?
Sure. Yeah. And contact me if they choose to. Office number here is 864-804-6640. And Palmetto Private Wealth Advisors.com. Happy to answer any questions, business or otherwise. Heavy on the otherwise is all good. But yeah, happy to help if we possibly can.
Well, Paul, thanks again for being here. I know some people are probably going, well, that was kind of underwhelming for 100. No, this is exactly the way I wanted it, because I think it's so important to stay centered on what I'm doing. The mission hasn't changed. Some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes has, certainly. You figure out how to run a business, but the mission hasn't changed from day one. It's to impact the lives of men for good. And so my request to you, if you're listening to this podcast, pass it along to a buddy, pass it along to a friend. We want to be found out. We want to make the difference in men's lives so they can go out and make a difference on their family's life. That's what this is all about for me. And that's why I do it. So, and I'm fortunate to have, a wingman like Paul to keep me on the straight and narrow and do life together. So for that, I'm grateful. So thank you, Paul. And thank you to everybody that listens to this podcast. It really means a lot to me that I hear from you. I love the emails that I get. Please, if you enjoyed this episode or any episode of the True Man podcast, review us. Give us a great review on your favorite podcast channel. And I can't even tell you how much that means to me. It gives me fuel to keep going. So we're going to wrap it up here, but I want you to go out and make this your very best day ever.